So I thought you might have a hat on for Mr. Putin's birthday, maybe a noisemaker.
a lot of secret rays which are targeted in my direction. That's why.
So, what can we expect tomorrow? Just for if you've just joined us, tomorrow is Putin's 70th birthday. We've been making a big deal about it on social media. We'll talk a little bit about the postcard later, but what do you think's going to happen tomorrow?
Uh, Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But
Hmm.
uh, I hope there would be some surprises for Vladimir Putin tomorrow. But nobody knows.
Ilya, I've learned that when you say nobody knows, what you mean is I know, but I can't tell you right now.
No, it's really because many things which are happening, they are happening on the opportunistic basis, right? So if they would happen, they would happen. If they won't happen, what can we do? Sometimes we fail to deliver the birthday presents to our dear ones. But
Yeah.
trying.
So when you say opportunistic, there are people who are laying plans should the opportunity arise to execute those plans.
Yeah, there is a line of people who want to congratulate Mr. Putin. And I would say there are several lines of people who want to congratulate Mr. Putin with his birthday. So who will be first? We don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see, won't we?
Yes, yes.
Do you think,
Yeah.
or do you know, is there anything special planned inside Russia or at the Kremlin? Is there a party, or is he going to lay low because he's afraid of what might come?
Well, I know that there was a party prepared. I am not sure whether they are doing it tomorrow or during the weekend. Uh, just don't know what's the final decision. Yeah, but they were planning to get together on one takeaway session, next to St. Petersburg. It's a new palace which
You were not
opened
invited.
for Vladimir Putin there, with a dedicated airstrip, and like that's a sophisticated location which his inner circle has prepared for him.
Hmm. And I'm guessing you were not invited to the party.
We're not. We're not, but we're not.
Not surprised and not disappointed. Simon, thank you for catching my verbal gymnastics there. So tomorrow, ironically, is another big day in the world. It's the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm pretty sure Mr. Putin is not a nominee or under consideration. Do you
When you
think
were
President
saying
Zelensky might be?
great day for the world, I was thinking you were saying about the book, saying some, lousy peace prize,
We'll get to that. Don't worry.
I don't know who would actually be getting the peace prize this year. It's actually pretty hard to predict.
It's hard to imagine any other event having the same prominence in consideration as the Russian invasion of Ukraine, though, I would think. And are people in
Right.
Ukraine and in your sphere speculating on this, or am I the first one to bring it up?
Yeah, actually, you're the first one who says this. Yeah, I totally forgot about this, and uh, is that you're making me thinking, what was happening during World War II with this type of prizes. I'm not sure where when the peace prize was originally announced, because originally it was not in the Nobel package, right? So it was
That's right. It
for
came later. That's right.
sciences, so it was introduced later, but I don't remember which year.
Yeah, I don't either. I do remember as a teenager being appalled. I mean, this pales in comparison to the Nobel Peace Prize. But I remember being shocked and appalled when I discovered that Adolf Hitler had been Times Man of the Year,
Yes, yeah,
which was
yeah.
really my lack of understanding of what that was about. But, somehow as a teenager, it was quite sensational to me. But the Peace Prize is very different. It's not to note someone because of the impact they've had on the world. It's literally to note someone because of their impact on peace. I would say that I can't imagine anyone else who's had a greater impact in the last year than not just President Zelensky, but the people of Ukraine.
I'm looking. It was first time introduced in 1901.
The Peace
Uh,
Prize.
yes, and during World War One, it was not awarded. The
Mm.
prize money was allocated to the special fund, yeah, so to be preserved to the moment of peace. And it was the same thing. Yeah, it was the same thing during World War II. So it
Oh,
was simply it was not awarded. Mhm.
so they avoided wading into the politics of the war by just not awarding the award.
No. And in 1945, it resumed, and it was awarded to Cordell Hull for his work to establish the United Nations.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Well, I guess by this time thereabouts tomorrow, we will know. So you brought up the book. Week you were an author. This week you're a published author. How does that feel?
Ah, it's tough. It's tough, you know. I feel like there are more obligations to come.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Yeah,
You're getting to know me better and better, aren't you?
yeah, yes.
Any reaction from people around you to the publication of the ebook on Tuesday?
Actually, yes, actually, quite a lot. Many people are asking, and 2 days ago, what was 3 days? No, 2 days ago, I was in the European Parliament and also advertised it a little bit, so people were asking there as well. So when it would be released, I was saying, so I'll just wait for a couple of more days. It will be there.
Yeah. Any reaction, negative or positive, that surprised you about the title and the subtitle?
No, everybody I'm talking with, they're very excited about the title. And when I am saying who wrote the foreword, they get even more excited. Uh, so no, that's very positive. I am very much looking forward to get feedback on what's actually inside the book. I am very much afraid that people will just stop reading, on the title. That's enough. Maybe in some cases that's a positive thing. Maybe enough is enough. But still, I hope that somebody would look inside.
Well, as a physicist, I will remind you that many people bought Stephen Hawking's books. Very few people read them. So my point is, you can accomplish a lot by publishing a book and getting people to think differently about the world, even if they never read the book. So, reading the book is a bonus in some cases. It doesn't have to be the goal. Um, it's interesting. I want to talk about these postcards that we've sent to Tucker Carlson. It's If you don't know, for people watching, Tucker Carlson is a huge cheerleader for Vladimir Putin and Russia. It's frankly outrageous, the things he says, and it's part of the reason it's outrageous is that he's feeding into the propaganda machine of Russia. So I think it's fair to say that just about every day, every night, they take clips of him from his broadcasts and air them on Russian newscasts and chat shows to show that, Putin is right and the US is wrong. And here's our proof. Here's the most watched news guy in America defending us. So we wanted to send Vladimir Putin some birthday cards. So the birthday cards, we've sent 5,000 of them. The suggestion of the card is that, this could be his last birthday. It's really up to him. Is he going to live beyond his 70th year? And there's some things he could do to prolong his longevity. And if he continues doing what he's doing, as Ilya sort of alluded to, probably the answer is, yeah, he does have to die. Obviously, we talk about that in the book. So it's been very exciting on social media to watch people respond to this idea of sending Tucker Carlson all these cards. Um, I'm hoping tonight or tomorrow he will talk about how irritating it is to step over boxes and boxes of birthday cards, but we'll see how that plays out.
Right, right, right.
I personally send my birthday wish.
But maybe he would advertise that a little bit,
Well, that is ultimately the goal, of course, of course.
Yeah.
So, so the other thing that's interesting this week, two things I want to bring up. One is you were very diplomatic in responding to a series of tweets by Elon Musk, and I want to talk about that. If people are not aware of it, Elon Musk, I think it started as a poll, sort of presented his peace plan for Russia and Ukraine. It was frankly ill-informed, I think, naive. Continues to be attacked for what he has said on Twitter. You responded in a very diplomatic way, so I'd like to get your take on his initial idea, why people think that what he suggested could be a possible idea because it's not, and then I'm just curious to know what prompted you to respond and to respond the way you did.
Well, first of all, yeah, what Elon Musk proposed, essentially, he proposed to surrender to Vladimir Putin and to give the Crimea to Russia, and yeah, for Ukraine to stay neutral and just stop fighting, and obviously that created a huge outrage in Ukraine. People were completely dissatisfied with such a proposal, and they felt in a way betrayed because Elon Musk was all the time very visible Ukraine supporter, and suddenly he came up with these proposals which people were taken like they were stabbed in the back, and that's why
Mm.
all of the country was discussing this, and in a great sorrow. And to my mind, it was not surprising at all, because it's a very typical syndrome of many business people. They think that they know better about everything, and sometimes, not sometimes, almost always, they tend to oversimplify the political events and solutions and approaches, and give advices which are impossible to follow. It's very typical for all nations, because politics and business management, they are very different, in approaches, and fundamentally, mentally. I was not surprised with this, and I didn't want to reply anything to Musk, but I saw him fighting uh, with Garry Kasparov, the chess champion, and uh, uh, quite prominent Russian oppositionist. And actually, in that fight, I was totally on the side of Elon Musk, because Gary, he is very tough in everything he says, and very quick in judgments. So he was writing something, "Who the hell are you, Elon Musk?" And you should go to Putin and receive your award for doing this. So it was like, some very nasty words that Kasparov wrote to Musk.
Yeah.
And, uh, obviously Musk ignored 99.9% of insults coming to him, but because that was Garry Kasparov, a prominent figure, a celebrity, so Musk replied that what have you done? I donated 80 million worth of Starlinks to Ukraine and facilitating internet connections at the battlefield for Ukrainian army, and you're just twitching here. So was like also pretty tough answer, but to my mind, he was right because yes, Gary is doing more talking than doing, and I decided at that time that I should reply and say that yeah, I totally disagree with what Musk has said, but yes, we in the resistance groups we are using the Starlinks. Our people in the front lines, they are using Starlinks. My TV channel is using Starlink, and they were delivered free of charge in the very difficult moments. Uh, and I'm really grateful for Musk for what he did, and he can say whatever he wants because there's nobody would listen it politically anyway.
Yes.
But he has done a lot of good for us indeed, and spent a lot of his personal money to support us, and we are thankful.
There was a follow-up poll that he posted that I want to talk with you about a little bit, and I don't have it in front of me, but he basically suggested that the annexed regions should be allowed to now vote again for whether they want. A lot has changed there because of the counterinsurgency and everything, uh, counteroffensive, excuse me, and that there should be a vote, and that clearly a legitimate election, and whatever the outcome in those areas should be determine whether those areas are Russian or Ukrainian. And
Mhm,
I knew inherently there were problems with that, but it was very interesting for me. I learned a lot watching other people respond to that idea because what the world needs to be reminded of, you can't have an election in those areas today because many people left at the beginning of the invasion and have not been returned. Many people have
mhm.
died, and the Russians have shipped in lots of people. So it would be a rigged election to say that you were having a free and fair election because the scale was tipped before the ballots were distributed. And I found that to be very useful. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
No, you are absolutely right in what you're saying. One thing is real political processes, and another thing is the imitation of different procedures. Unfortunately, in our particular case, now Vladimir Putin, being a lawyer by background, he always plays by the letter of the law, but not by the spirit of the law. And he needs the justification of certain procedures just to put check mark that certain things were done when in reality they never happened. And it's a very uh, funny thing. Somebody has posted an article uh, from Soviet encyclopedia on the word annexation. And you understand that Soviet encyclopedia was written in the communist times with a very heavy ideological tint. And more or less, the article sounded like annexation is the bourgeois process uh, uh, to seize the territory of another state. Usually, annexation are preceded by a fake referendums that are being organized on the occupied territories uh, by the most reactionist circles that are allied with the enemy state and also stuff like that. So it was like the complete scenario that was played by Vladimir Putin, just with such, Soviet slang, such ideological hinted way. Like that's why we just decided to post it because in the Soviet Union, people knew what what it meant.
Well, and to that end, you brought up the forward to the book earlier, and we've teased this here on the show together, but I don't think we've ever actually talked about it. If you look at the cover of the book, and by the way, I mentioned yesterday in one of the shows, get the book because Ilya and I are going to talk more and more about it. Last week, we couldn't refer to things in the book because you couldn't read it. Now you can read it. We hope you will, because I think it's going to color a lot of our conversations in the show going forward. The forward of the book, on the cover of the book, says, "Forward, Vladimir Putin's broken promise of democracy." What Ilya wanted and I wanted was the forward to say, the cover of the book to say, "Forward by Vladimir Putin." The publishers got a little nervous about that because what we did was, and I encourage you to go see this, we took a speech that Putin gave in 2001, 2 weeks after 9/11. He gave the speech in German to the German parliament. And I don't know if you had this reaction. We haven't actually talked about this. But when I read this speech, I thought to myself, that's a speech Ronald Reagan would have been proud to give.
Hmm.
But it wasn't Ronald Reagan. It was Vladimir Putin. It was about democracy. It was about partnership. It was about working with Europe. It was about human rights. It was an unbelievably positive, affirmative speech by a man we know 20 years later is a dictator.
Hmm.
And how does someone make that transition from wanting to play with the big boys in the rest of the world to isolating himself and doing the things that he does today?
No, yeah, indeed, I remember that speech very well when it was originally pronounced in the German Bundestag, and I remember it very well. I really liked it at that time because I really thought that it was very much on target, and I would have signed under this speech. You know, I was really proud that my president was saying something like this. I never voted for Vladimir Putin, but when he was saying this, that's the guy I want to see as the president of my country. But obviously, that for Vladimir Putin, it was just one of the masks that he wore, and
Mm,
he never paid too much attention to the words that he is saying in public, because for him, it's a mere way of manipulating society. So he is saying
mm,
what needs that for a certain audience. And these are professionals who are writing those speeches for him. And, you know, there were good professionals who wrote this speech for him when he was in Germany at that time. At that time, he had different priorities. At that time, he wanted to join NATO. At that time, he wanted to join European Union. At that time, he wanted to become an equal partner with the global powers. And um, now what happened later is what many Putin verstehers, you know, so people who like to be apologetic about everything that has happened later. They are saying, oh, you know, it's the West to blame because it's the West who pushed him away. He was opening up, and we neglected this, and stuff like that. You know, I think that it's partially true. I think that indeed Western policies towards Russia were seriously flawed, and I think that they were simply wrong. I think that they should have been inclusive. That such intentions should be embraced, but obviously the West could not play by Putin's expectations, because he wanted deep in his heart, he wanted just to again split the spheres of influence. And by saying that he wanted to be a partner, he wanted to say, okay, so this is for you, this is for me, and this is for at that time George W. Bush, you know, and we will divide, you know, and rule the world. And that's obviously was very much against the Western philosophy. But I think that actually this could be played around because he was at the time weak, and that was in general his foreign policy agenda. He wanted to be really the part of the West, and I think that he could have been, and Russia could have been properly incorporated in the West, and then the procedures would not allowed him to deviate too far. But it didn't happen because the Western approach towards Russia was different. That Russia was a weak economy, that it was a state who was defeated during the Cold War, that it was just one of the regional players who shouldn't be accounted with. And the result is what we see. The Russians became pissed off, Putin became pissed off, and at the end of the day, we see the war, the new and the largest war in Europe since 1945.
I don't know if books have been written about this, but there should be, because it's a your explanation of it is incredibly helpful and insightful. And for us in the West in particular, I think if you pick up the book and you look at this speech, you're going to be stunned by who that man was versus who he is today. And then if you filter through what
He was the
Ilya
same man.
just said, you begin to realize,
He was the same man. We shouldn't be mistaken. He was the same man. It's just that he had different agenda. He believed that his interests
yes,
are what they are in speech. Now he believes that those interests, they were naive, and that they could never be followed the way they were pronounced. So he now thinks that this attempt was futile, and that it was a mistake even to propose this.
Mm, mm. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that if you go back in history and you realize it could have gone otherwise, had there been a collection of different decisions, mostly by the West, I would guess, history or current events might have turned out very different. Now, there's a movie in the US called Sliding Doors, where these doors keep sliding and a woman's life keeps changing because she makes a different decision in this moment. And it's just it
Mhm.
seems like it was an inflection point in history that no one predicted what the outcome would be. But you can go back to that inflection point and say, if we had done X, we might have had a different Y.
Okay. You're right. You're right.
I want to ask you about one last thing before I let you go. There was a story in the New York Times yesterday. US believes Ukrainians were behind an assassination in Russia. We heard a lot about this assassination from you. What is your reaction? Do you want to give us a recap of the story and then and any reaction to it?
Oh yeah. The story is that it was a Russian partisan group called National Republican Army, who declared that it would fight tooth and nail against Putinism, and that they would organize personal attacks on the leaders of Putin's regime. And they started with attacking the father and the daughter, Alexander and Daria Dugina. And Dugin father is basically the top ideologist of this war, and fascist number one in the country, and Daria was his operative, and the person who is responsible for public requests for a terrorist attack against Azov prisoners of war that were assassinated, 50 of them that were assassinated in summer. And so they were the first, and that created a lot of debate whether these Russian partisans, they altogether exist or not. And still, it's a source of a debate, because obviously, how you would know. I was telling about them in public, but journalists, whatever, they cannot independently verify the information, and that's why they cast a lot of doubts, and especially that the security forces in Russia, obviously, for them, it's very bad thing to admit that yes, there is some uncontrolled political group and a violent political group in the country, so they try to disseminate the information that it's a deed that is organized by Ukrainian security forces. Um, in United States, in this article, it's a leak. It's a leak from certain part of U.S. Government and security establishment, which sends a message to Ukrainian that Ukrainians should not be involved in such a covert activity inside Russia, because the political establishment in United States thinks that that may provoke Russia for retaliatory actions, and in particular personal attacks on Ukrainian leaders.
Hmm.
Uh, And as always, they say that Ukrainians are weak, Russians are stronger. That's why it would be counterproductive for Ukrainians to be involved in something like this. Um, so that was the purpose of the article, because I know how it was published. New York Times contacted me, listened to everything from the very beginning. They were saying that they have this information from U.S. government. They didn't take a single word of mine, obviously, to the country, to the normal journalist practices, and just put the position that they had from the very beginning from U.S. government. So they just, needed an excuse to publish this leak. They got this excuse, and so they totally deny both Russians and Americans in this situation. They both deny the right of Russians to actually do something. They all discount Russian people as people who can actually fight and resist for themselves, and have their own mind and make their own decisions. The only thing which is truthful in this regards, that for obvious reason, I'm here in Ukraine, and Ukraine is fighting with Russia. We are in the state of war, and obviously I am regularly informing Ukrainian authorities about what's going on in Russia, and so with all these partisan fights and like whatever. And obviously they gave me the green light, so that time as the oppositionist I can be in Ukraine and organize resistance in Russia, because obviously it works in Ukrainian favor. But that doesn't mean that they actually guide the process, that they take the decisions in the process, that they organize the process. No, they let me do it, and that's correct, and that's reflected in the article. But the rest is just a leak with the objective to influence Ukrainians to stay away from this kind of activity. I'm very much sure that it was prepared in lengthily, this type of leak, based by what they're telling there.
Yeah, it's the title itself is revealing if you read it carefully. US believes Ukrainians were behind an assassination in Russia. Doesn't say Ukrainians were behind an assassination in Russia. Just US believes it. So it's reporting on what somebody believes versus what is known as fact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it reads differently, and obviously, Russian propaganda from this morning is extremely excited about this. Everybody is writing about it in
Yeah.
all Russian large propaganda outlets. Yeah, that's what we were telling from the very beginning. It's all Ukrainians. Now Americans publicly
Yeah.
admit it.
The only thing missing is Tucker Carlson. There's make it a complete circle of American propaganda for Russian purposes. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to keep talking for a few minutes. Thanks for joining us, Ilya. We'll talk to you next week. I'm going to see if I can remember how to
Thank you very much, Gregg.
get onto your work. Thank you. How do I do this? Let's see.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you.
See you later,
Thank
Ilya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.